I don't think it's news to anyone that Americans are not feeling good about the economy right now. Between rising inflation, rising cost of goods, rising unemployment, Americans are not feeling very confident in their future. I mean, all you got to do is go to the grocery store and look at your cart and be like, why is this 3 times what it was a few years ago? It's pretty crazy. And there's numerous complex factors that have led us to this point. We've been here before as a nation. I'm sure it won't be the last time. But I'm not an economist, and so that's not what I want to focus on this morning. I am more concerned and more interested in talking about the spiritual and emotional toll that this is having on us as a people. On the one hand, there are people that are feeling just fine about the economy. They're not worried about their finances at all, and they feel pretty good. On the other hand, especially amongst younger people, there's a lot of people that are feeling pretty hopeless. And they don't really feel like there's any future for them. They feel like they got dealt a bad hand, and they might as well just live it up while they can and not worry about the future because it's pointless anyway. And maybe you are numbered amongst those who are stressed out about money. Maybe you find yourself in more debt than you thought you would. Maybe you see your savings draining. Maybe you're not meeting the goals that you set for yourself. And you don't have peace in regards to your resources. That's what I want to focus on this morning. Because I do believe as a minister of the gospel that it is possible to have financial peace regardless of your status and regardless of the state of the economy. And the Bible shows us different ways that is possible. And so what I want to do this morning is I want to try to answer the question, how do I begin to experience financial peace? How do I begin to experience financial peace? Turn with me in your Bibles to Matthew chapter 25, beginning with the 14th verse. Matthew 25, beginning with verse 14. If you're using a Bible app this morning, I am in the English Standard Version. Matthew 25, beginning with verse 14. Today marks the beginning of our annual stewardship sermon series. This is our first year open as a church, so it's officially annual as of today. But this is something we do want to do every year as a church, and you might be wondering why, because a lot of people feel like it's none of the pastor's business as to how they handle their resources. But if you look at the scriptures, Jesus actually talks more about money than he does heaven or hell, and I think the reason is because money is one of the biggest competitors for our worship and attention with God. It is very easy to turn money into a master or an idol, and God does not want that for us. He wants us to be at peace, and he wants us to be free. And of course, there's also the practical implications that one of the biggest things that destroys a church plant is just lack of funding. You can have an awesome church, and the money just runs out. And so it is something that we want to discuss about being good stewards with what God has given us. And so this morning we look at a parable that Jesus tells and a series of parables about the end of the world, his second coming. Today is the parable of the talents. I'm going to start by talking about good managers, and then I'll talk about bad managers, and I'm going to end by talking about a way that we can be good managers and manage well what God has given us. Good managers have faith in God and use their resources productively. Good managers have faith in God and use their resources productively. Let's look at verses 14 through 17. And Jesus said, "For it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted to them his property. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. He who had received the 5 talents went at once and traded with them, and he made 5 talents more. So also he who had the 2 talents made 2 talents more." So first off, like I already said, this is an apocalyptic parable. All the parables in this section are talking about the second coming of Jesus Christ. Christ promised that he will come again soon, and then when he does come, he's going to judge the living and the dead. And so all of us will one day stand before God and give an account before him. For those of us who are not Christians, or people that are not Christians, don't follow Christ, they will stand before the Father and try to make the case as to why they're good enough to get into heaven. Spoiler alert, no one is good enough to get into heaven all by themselves. We need Christ to do that. But for Christians, we're not standing there asking the question, do we get in or not? We are getting in because of what Jesus accomplished for us on the cross. Instead, we're simply giving an account to Christ of how we served him in this life. and we will receive rewards based on our service. And this kind of bothers some people because it doesn't feel very fair, but I do feel like if you're a martyr, maybe you should get a little something extra, right? So this is what we're going to be seeing at the end of time, and Jesus is telling various parables to give us different camera angles of how this is going to work out. And in this particular parable, he's focusing in on how we manage what God has given us, and he tells this story of a master who entrusts his property to his servants and goes away and promises to return just like Christ does. The very first thing that we learn from this parable is that everything we have comes to us from the Lord. As followers of Christ, we believe that even the money that we earn through our income ultimately comes from God, because he is the one who entrusted you with the gifts and talents to be able to do that work. He's the one who sustains you with strength, and he's the one that controls everything. And so we view our stuff not as our stuff, but as God's stuff, and we're simply holding on to it for him, which is why Christians use the word stewardship or management, because that is what our role is with our possessions. And so he gives out differing amounts to the servants. He gives 1, 1, 2, and 1, 5. A talent, by the way, is a sum of money. It's equal to a year's wages. And so he gives them a good amount of resources, depending on how well he thinks each of them can handle it. And then he goes away. Now, immediately what we see is 2 of these servants begin to start trading with what he's been given them and using what he's given them through good business practices to multiply it so there's more when his master comes back. The one with 2 ends up with 4, the one with 5 ends up with 10. And let's see what happens when the master returns. What is his response to these servants who act as good managers of what he entrusted them with? Look at verses 19 through 23. Now, after a long time, the master of those servants came and settled accounts with them. And he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here, I have made 5 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And he also, who had the 2 talents, came forward, saying, Master, you delivered to me 2 talents. Here, I have made 2 talents more. His master said to him, Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. So clearly the master is very pleased with both of these servants who went out and were good managers of what he gave them and was able to multiply it and do something productive with it. But here's the thing, this can be a little strange to us through our American eyes, because we don't really care about good management that much. What impresses Americans is big, long numbers with lots of commas in them. We're impressed by the CEO who, hustled and grinded and was able to build up a big company and become a billionaire. That's very impressive, but we're also impressed by lottery winners who just scratch something and get $1 million, because as Americans, we just like big numbers. But yet, one servant started with 2 and ended with 4. One servant started with 5 and ended with 10, and they're both treated equally by the master. See, God owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. He owns everything. He made all your stuff. God is not impressed by big bank accounts the way that we are as Americans. What God is looking for when it comes to your resources is your character. Do you manage things the way that God manages things? Really, our resources are a test. Because every transaction we make is not just logged by our bank, it gets logged in our souls. And the reason some people do well with large sums and some don't depends on what kind of person they become along the way. How they use that, because it can change you as a person. It's a spiritual matter. And so whether you make $50,000 a year or you're a multimillionaire, if you put in the same amount of discipline and work managing whatever God's entrusted you with, whatever the amount is, then you will be trusted with more in His kingdom, and you'll be praised as a good and faithful servant. Because this is not just a financial issue of quality of life or that kind of thing, or making sure you can retire. All those things are important. What we see here is that if we manage well, we do receive rewards, and we're placed in higher positions of authority on the new heaven and new earth. Who would have thought God would have cared about little things like this? But He's numbered the hairs on our head, and He wants to see how well we use our resources. Now, this is a parable, and it's using some old language and kind of some ancient Near Eastern stuff, and so it can be kind of hard for us to relate to this. It's meant to sort of be in images and illusions and that sort of thing. But I think it's helpful for us to think about this in more practical ways that will relate to us in our context. We're not going to literally be bringing bags of gold into heaven with us on Judgment Day. But what will we present to our Father on that day that we stand before Christ at the Bema seat? Maybe you present to Him your family. There's a lot of people these days that are choosing not to have children because they think it's too expensive, it's a waste of money. But using what God is giving you to raise children and invest in people who will grow up and become productive members of society is a godly use of your resources. Yes, it means fewer cruises and maybe less nice cars. But one day you get to stand before the Lord and say, Father, what you gave me I used on these children, on this family, and here I present my family to you. Well done, good and faithful servant. Maybe you use what He's given you, you start a business. That business creates jobs, and it delivers products to people that improve their lives. And maybe even get the opportunity to invest in other communities by opening up plants or stores, and it helps elevate everybody in that economy. You can stand before God one day and say, Father, you entrusted me with this. I used it to be productive, and look at all the families we were able to help and invest in with what you gave me. And of course, let's not also forget of how we can use it to help people get to heaven through the church. You know, Martin Luther, the German reformer, said that we all kind of go through multiple baptisms as we're becoming Christians. And he said the final baptism that we all go through is the baptism of our wallets. And so if we're going to be a church that reaches lost people, we can't expect them to immediately come in here and the day they get saved, they start writing us 10% checks of their income. That's just not how it happens. And so in essence, we as the believers are the ones who are funding this mission project that allow people to grow in their faith until they begin to give God more and more of their life. You can think of it as you're sponsoring that person's salvation. And so one day we will stand before the Lord and say, God, I used what you gave me. I invested in your project, the church, to do local mission. And look at all the people we helped and baptized. Here they are, Father. And it goes much more than just the material work the church does. The church is still the biggest charitable organization on the planet. If the church stopped being charitable, this planet would just fall into chaos. But again, poverty is far more than just giving people stuff they don't have. There's also the spiritual and social impact that churches have, and that is a praiseworthy use of what God has given us. But that requires people to be like those servants who are productive and good stewards. But here's the thing, and I think we all know this. We don't all always feel like being good managers, do we? We don't always feel like that. Bad managers, on the other hand, lack faith in God and squander their resources. Bad managers lack faith in God and squander their resources. Let's go back to verse 18 real quick and look at the other servant. Verse 18 says, but he who had received the 1 talent went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. That's a pretty goofy verse. What is this guy, a pirate hiding buried treasure or something? What's going on here? And I thought long and hard. I put a ton of effort into these sermons in this series for this month. And I thought really, really hard, what is the best way to describe the actions and attitude of this servant who buried the money in the ground? I think the best way to sum it up is like this. He was saying, I don't want to be responsible for this. I don't want to have to manage this. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to work with this stuff. I just don't want to be involved. And maybe being sympathetic, maybe he thought that was the safest place to hide it so it doesn't get lost. I mean, after all, it'd be pretty bad if he ended up trading it and losing it, right? Later on, we'll find out that was actually not the best option. But this servant essentially chose the least productive, the least disciplined, and least responsible choice with what his master entrusted him with. And so anytime we use the resources that God gives us in a way that is unproductive, undisciplined, and irresponsible, we are embodying the spirit of this servant. And what is the master's response to this servant on that day when he returns? Look at verses 24 through 29. He also, who had received the 1 talent, came forward saying, Master, I knew you to be a hard man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you scattered no seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here, you have what is yours. But his master answered him, You wicked and slothful servant, you knew that I reap where I have not sown and gathered where I scattered no seed? Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and at my coming I should have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to he who has 10 talents. For to everyone who has will more be given, and he will have an abundance. But from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. So obviously the master is not very happy with this servant. Not very pleased. The servant did nothing, was irresponsible, and did not bring a return to his master at the end. He had nothing to show for it. He was in the exact same place he was when he started. And he makes these excuses saying, I was scared of you, I know you're really strict, and I didn't know it was going to happen, so I just did this instead. But if he was actually afraid of his master, he could have just put it in the bank and it would have accrued interest. He claims the master is harsh and strict, but at no point does the master accept that estimation of himself. In fact, he's challenging him. He says, if you were truly afraid of me, you would not have buried it in the ground. You would have invested it with the bank. No one who's afraid of their master would act so foolish. So he calls him out. And what we actually see is that he wasn't just being safe. He actually was being apathetic, irresponsible, and did not care about what his master had at all. And in response, he is called wicked and lazy. Wicked and lazy. And we might look at this again and say, well, he was just a neutral party. He just didn't want to be involved. He didn't ask for that stuff. Why should he have to be responsible for it? But again, it goes back to the fact that we all have things, and those things ultimately belong to our Creator God. And so as followers of Christ, you cannot just be neutral when it comes to these issues. We must be good managers. Because again, this is not just about going into debt or not having a retirement fund. There are spiritual implications of this. And I'm going to read verse 30, which is the harshest verse in this passage. And hang on with me because I'm going to break down exactly what's happening here. Let's look at verse 30. And cast the worthless servant into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Now, all throughout Matthew and the Gospels, whenever Christ talks about outer darkness or weeping and gnashing of teeth, it is a reference to hell. And I want to be super clear about this. The Bible never contradicts itself. Matthew is not teaching a works-based salvation contrary to the books of Romans and Ephesians. They're all singing the same song. But what Matthew does time and time again throughout his gospel is he describes the fruit you would see from someone who is truly born again and is truly a follower of Jesus Christ. What he's not teaching is that poor financial management is a mortal sin that sends you to hell. What he's revealing to us is that there's a heart behind these actions. And what those actions reveal is a heart that lacks faith in God. A heart does not care about God. A heart does not believe in a coming judgment. A heart that does not believe that all we have is a gift from our Creator. Even characters like John Calvin would say, here are the signs to know whether you're regenerate or not. So we're not saying that you automatically go to hell for doing this. What we are saying is it should cause us to check ourselves like a spiritual check engine light. Is my heart truly in the right place? Am I reflecting someone who has faith in God? Or am I acting faithlessly and irresponsible. And even if you don't end up in the outer darkness, we cannot expect those who squander every opportunity God's given them to have a very high status in the kingdom of heaven. These are hard things to talk about, but this is what Christ wanted us to know so we can live in expectation of him coming back soon. Again, we have to deprogram our American minds when we approach this subject. I really like being an American. We're very dysfunctional when it comes to our stuff. There are people in Africa who have nothing that are way happier than we are. We have to deprogram our brains. And maybe even this morning you got to deprogram your brain from other sermons you've heard about money. Because we look at success not in terms of how well we manage, but how well we look. Americans love to signal to other people how successful they are, like to signal status. We do this through fancy cars, fancy watches, expensive jewelry, expensive makeup, expensive clothes, vacations you're not really enjoying but really look good on Instagram. That's what we do. We want to look successful, and we look at a guy that's got a Rolex and we immediately think, man, he's got to be doing really well in life. But a lot of these things are illusions. Especially online, there are influencers online that will show you big rolls of cash on TikTok or Instagram, or they're on a private jet. They're talking about, I just hustled and grinded, man, and that's how I'm in this private jet right now. You could be just like me if only you buy my course. Did you know there are entire companies that make fake sets for influencers? Like fake private jets they can go and film on? I know of a guy who actually owns a private jet for his company, and he rents it out when it's sitting on the tarmac to influencers to come and film so their followers think they're rich. A lot of this is not reality. The fact of the matter is, in the eyes of God, the family driving the used minivan who pays for all their stuff on debit cards is more successful than the influencer who's on the private plane. Most of those influencers aren't just broke, they're in massive debt. So we have to change our way of thinking. Don't impress people by spending money you don't have to impress people you don't like on things you don't need. Instead, focus on good management. That is how we begin to have financial peace. By looking at our stuff as a gift from God and then managing it well. The way you begin to have financial peace is to manage well by making a plan for your income. Make a plan for your income. You know, obviously, from this parable, we want to be more like the good servants and less like the bad servants. So that means we have to be good managers and not bad managers of our stuff. We have to view every dime that God entrusts us with as a gift that we have to give an account for. And that requires us to make a plan so that every dollar we have is doing a job that is productive and useful, that is used for things that are good. That means if we're not going to be like the bad servant, we have to avoid wasteful spending. Now, right now, someone in this room is probably thinking in their head, okay, here we go. This is the part where he tells me to make my coffee at home and stop going through Starbucks, as if you millennials just didn't buy so much avocado toast, all of you would own homes by now. I've heard it before, and I'm sick of it. Good news. I'm not going to tell you that this morning, because that would be legalistic. The truth is, Starbucks might be within your budget. That might not be wasteful spending for you. But the only way you know is if you make a plan. Because wasteful spending looks different for everyone, but it's basically defined as any spending that does not advance you towards your goals or help you accomplish the mission you have in life. If it saps you from being able to accomplish your goals and your mission, that is wasteful spending. And there's lots of different ways this pops up. For example, sports betting apps. If you got one of those on your phone, delete it. It's one of the fastest growing addictions in the country. They have teams of psychologists there to just extract money out of your bank account. DoorDash and Amazon, again, hack your brain to make impulsive purchases on things you don't need. Now that McDonald's is 3 times as expensive as it would be if you went to the store. And of course, the bane of all of our existences, forgotten subscriptions. How many of us go through our bank account and go like, I have 4 Netflix accounts? When did that happen? But they bank on you forgetting about it, and when you sign up, you sign a little box that says, we can raise our prices whenever we want without telling you. And then they'll just keep taking more and more of your money. These are wastes. There's much better things that we can be using our resources for, and so we have to make sure that we're having a plan for this. Look, here's the deal. We can let major corporations hack our psychology to make impulsive purchases that benefit them and not our families and communities and our churches, or we can choose the way of discipline and good stewardship. One of the biggest killers of the middle class in America right now is not the economy, it's something called lifestyle inflation, where our spending slowly outpaces our income. And then we get into more debt and into more trouble. But if, on the other hand, we look at everything we have as a gift from God and we sit down and thank Him for our resources and make a plan for every dollar, then we can be good stewards. And we can see that He can take that and multiply it and use it for many, many good things to be more productive and more helpful with everything that God has given us, especially to help people get to heaven through His church. Now, there's lots of different ways you can do this. You can use a notepad, you can use a spreadsheet. I did that for a long time. There's also a lot of great apps out there that help you budget, and the one I would recommend is the one that I use, is one called Every Dollar. It is from Ramsey. And no, I'm not sponsored by them. I do not have an affiliate link. I don't get a kickback. It's actually the one I use, and I highly recommend it. What's helpful about it is you can get the free version where you just put in your budget and keep track of it manually, but if you do the paid version, you can connect your bank account, and all those little swipes you do all of a sudden pop up, and they go, where do I go? What do I do? My favorite feature is the paycheck planning feature, where you put in when you get paid and when all your bills come out, and that helps you figure out when you get to overspend, and also it helps you find money that you didn't have. I did this with spreadsheets for years, and I thought I was doing a pretty good job with it. Then a few months ago, with Shannon's job change, we had to get a little more strict with our spending, and I got this app again, and I was like, whoa, there's money that I was just throwing in the garbage that I didn't even know I had. It's super helpful. It can help you put aside an emergency fund, pay off debt, and set aside for the future. Now, we as a church truly want to help you find peace and be able to be a good manager. And so what we're going to do is, if you are interested in using this app, and it's maybe out of your budget right now, we can pay for a year's subscription for 5 people in the church if you want to use it. You don't have to have us pay for it, but if you want to and it's out of your budget, we're happy to pay for your first year's subscription because we're serious about helping you be a good manager. We want to equip you. So if you're interested in that, come talk to me, send me an email. We're happy to help you. Because this is not about living in big mansions or living your best life now. It's just about being faithful with what the Lord has given us. True believers are good managers of what God has given them, not wasting it on vain things, but using it productively, and most of all, for helping people to get to heaven through the church. So make a plan for what God has given you, so that everything is used responsibly and productively. God has been so kind to us, providing for what we need. But if we take what He's given us and we waste it on selfish and foolish purchases, we're not just cheating ourselves, we're cheating our neighbors as well. We want to be not just blessed by God, but also be a blessing to others. Those resources are meant to provide the stability for our children, to invest in our communities, to help those in need, and to help people find Jesus Christ. If we manage our resources well, we will not only be blessed, we can bless others in ways beyond what we thought we were capable of doing. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
Thank you for listening. You can join us on Sunday mornings at 10 a.m., learn more about our services on our website, or by following us on Instagram.